rowers who wanted to exercise every single day. Somebody said, if we only could row every other day, we'll be better off. We may actually build up an opportunity for two teams. When we row, the others to relax. When we relax, they row. Maybe we can have two teams using the same boat. The captain said, this is your boat. You have to know it as the palm of your hand. You have to love it. You have to know every single detail about your boat, about your teammates. You can't row every other day. Well, not only was this, but somebody brought up, why don't we row once a week? This way, we will have sufficient time to pay attention to other details of life. We are not only rowers, we have families to take care of. If we spend all the time rowing, what about our families? What about our social acquaintances? And so the team began to murmur, and there were some fractions. The captain did his best to encourage every rower to stay on the team, to row every day, and to ensure that they all followed the rigorous program of exercise, diet, and learning and practice. But it was not easier anymore. Gradually, the team began to divide into, you remember, they were sitting in 2 rows of 12. Fine, they were all working together, but they all had a shirt, a t-shirt, on the back of which, and at the front side, there was their number. The people with the odd numbers were sitting on the one side, and the people with the even numbers were sitting on the other side. Now you guessed that if you're sitting on the side with the odd numbers, the likelihood of them acting very odd beats the odds. And those sitting on the even side were evenly distributing their desire to get even with everybody in the team and with everybody on the other side of the team. Rower number 1 looked and saw in his midst, on his side of the team, an oddly looking face. Somebody who did not have the right kind of muscles, and said, you have not the right size muscles because of your diet. If you could only change your diet, you will be better off. Rower number 3 voiced a different opinion. He looked at everybody else and said, you know, rower number 1 may be right, but if you look at me, I have the biggest and best muscles of everybody else. How about that? Rower number 7 raised the issue. I have been in this team ever since it began. I'm the oldest, and based on seniority, I have the rights and the privileges and to be heard. And not only that, you have to agree with me based on everything I say. Well, rowers number 9 and 11 were single gentlemen. They actually were competing for the heart of a single lady, which brought them into a brawl. First, it was very, very subtle. Gradually, it escalated and went through a verbal exchange to actually physical threats and show-off of manly muscles. The side with the even numbers were not better off either. They had some peculiar issues there. Somebody, like rower number 2, for example, began to consider that you had to be much younger than anybody else because you had much more prosperity and chances of staying on the team longer. Rower number 4 began to express the opinion that maturity was a key issue. That not only the right diet, but the right knowledge was key. He actually voiced his knowledge of the manual, said, I know this manual back and forth. I've been reading it much more than all of you. I can tell you all the commentaries about this manual as well. You don't have to convince me about anything about rowing. I know it all. Rower number 6 was another interesting case. He was very proficient in several languages. He could row back and forth in English and French and German and Spanish and Portuguese. He knew several languages that were so-called dead languages and said, do you know what? I can read manuals from ancient times how to row. Don't you dare tell me that you know anything about rowing. Because rowing was not invented by you guys. It's been on the world ever since the world began. Noah could have rowed if he had a chance. But his boat was too big, and there were only 8 of them. Rowers number 10 and 12 looked at each other and said, simultaneously, surprisingly to both of them, I've paid the biggest money to get this boat. Well, that, you guess what brought him into. Everybody began to argue between rowers 10 and 12, who was the biggest money contributor to buy the boat to keep the paddles on. Not only was there fights on each side of the boat, soon they began to accuse each other. The right side of the boat said, you know what? The left side is wrong. The left side said, you are not right either. The right side said, we are staying strongly to the descriptions of the manual. We will follow the routine rigidly. By doing everything, we will ensure that we win the race. And they accused the rowers on the left side for taking things far too liberal. The rowers on the left side, however, said, yes, you may accuse us of being a little bit too liberal, but we are actually acting on the spirit of rowing. You don't have to row in order to be a rower. As long as you desire to be a rower, it makes you a rower. Or you may join the row team, and that makes you sufficiently good enough rower. You don't have to follow rigid rules of rowing. The right people thought they had it all right and said, all right, we have it all right. We'll keep rowing. You on the left side, you will be left behind. So the right side began rowing and rowing and rowing and rowing, and guess what happened? To which the left side laughed and said, see what happens when you follow rules? You go in circles, but you have to have the spirit and the desire. You have to open yourself to opportunities. See what happens when we row. And they started going nice and smooth on the rhythm of a beautiful song. Back and forth they rowed, and back and forth they rowed, and circles did they make. The rights were not right too much, and those who were on the left side were not leaving it behind. As much as they tried, what do you think still happened to the boat? Still sitting there. The boat was excellent. The paddles were new. The seats were comfortable. But the boat was getting nowhere. It was moving not further than where it was. After a period of silence, the captain spoke. Captain said, we have to get together. We need everybody.